Hi, folks. With Tacitus Today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio, radio, no pictures live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast as you're driving along in your car or your truck, or put in those earbuds and have a listen on public transport. In this essay, I'd like to talk about how long would it take, how many years of saving would it take for a young person starting out to be able to afford even an entry-level property. Now, again, we're not talking waterfront mansions here, but an absolute, the basement level, the entry-level property, the cheapest properties around. How long would it take you to save up and buy one of those? Let's make it easy for our mythical sort of supposed character here and say saver here, and let's say that they've just finished college, they've got an average wage job, they're still staying with their folks. The folks aren't stinging them for rent or food or anything like that. They're just staying. So how long would it take somebody in that situation to save? Let's assume that they haven't even got a car or something to pay for. They're just using public transport, say, to get to work. And let's assume they're a really diligent saver. They're not going out and partying and night clubbing or snorting coke or anything like that. They're very they take cut sandwiches to work. They're not getting going to the local food gallery and lunchtime and spending a gazillion dollars on that. They're very, very disciplined, very focused, and have almost zero social life. Now, that's not a real person, of course, but let's assume they're that disciplined. Now, they've got a college loan to pay off, and so they've got that to consider as well, to come out of their wage. But so if they now also, given the sort of income they're on, there's only a certain level of mortgage they can afford. Now, I'm speaking about Sydney here, which is one of the most expensive real estate cities in the world, but nonetheless, how much deposit, if you like, do they need to save up before they can acquire a property where they can equally afford to service the mortgage? It's no good putting the minimum amount down, but then you can't afford the mortgage payment. So it has to be enough deposit. So again, we're assuming the average wage here. Now, there'll be a few people in the upper echelon, not at that age group necessarily, but there'll be some people in the upper echelons of the wage thing. And I'll come back to that in a minute to give you an idea of what the mathematics, how it would look different for someone on a higher wage. But assuming the average wage at the moment, and again, the college loan, they're staying with their folks and so on. Now, it would take them discipline. This is disciplined saving, also factoring in the increase in the real estate prices. Now, I'll assume the real estate prices won't go up in any greater proportion than they are for the last 20 odd years. So I'll use that as because that's been a huge increase. So I'll assume it won't be either that high, but if it is, then this would, of course, then change the mathematics. It would take them 19 and a half years. So they're going to be 21 or 22 years old. They'll be 43, still living with their folks. They'll be 43, and then they'll be able to buy some shitbox entry-level property. Now, of course, you're coming back again to if they're in a high income bracket, that would change. But even if they're in, say, the upper quartile of incomes, that still wouldn't materially affect or hugely affect. So it's 19.5 years. And if you're in an upper income band, you've probably got a more expensive college degree to pay off. So that brings it down to 14 years if you're in the upper quartile. So really not a whole lot of difference. Now, if you do have a higher income job, you've got also other pressures on you. There are other social pressures. The people around you got more money. They're partying more often. You got to wear sharper brand level clothes. Whereas if you're on the average wage job, you can buy all your clothes at Walmart or something like that. But you can't really do that if you're in a higher wage job. So there's much higher costs. So I'm being a little bit generous here. But let's suppose you're looking at 40. You're going to be 42 or 43 years old before you can buy a shitbox property. Now, no one can actually be that disciplined for that long. So really, you're looking at if you look at, say, what might be an average entertainment expenditure, maybe you sort of go out to eat here, or you get some cups of coffee at the local cafe for lunch. That adds up pretty quickly. So you'd be looking at well beyond 19 and a half years in the average wage. The reality is it just wouldn't be achievable. No one can be that even close to that level of discipline. So without your folks giving you a lot of money, assume they can afford that. So really inheritance is the only way you're ever going to own any property there. So I just wanted to give you that, sort of illustrate that as an example. That's how long it takes or would take for someone of that level of discipline. Now, if you're going to spend money around, like you could change that to, say, 32, 33 years if you wanted to have a bit of a social life, and maybe you want to buy a car or something like that. So that means you'd be 55 before you could afford and then you've got a mortgage that's supposed to be going for 25 years, 30 years. No bank will give you a mortgage at age 55. So basically, if you look at it from absolute, dispassionate level of mathematics and arithmetic, it's not possible for someone on the average wage. It's only barely possible for people in the upper wage band. Now, if you look at the amount of people in those upper wage bands, that's shrinking rapidly in the West relative to cost of living, and that primary cost of living being real estate. So when you look at the amount of people in Sydney, for example, that from their own income that can afford to service a mortgage, make the savings, service a mortgage, and get deposit together to buy an entry level property, which if you had in the upper income band, you wouldn't be looking at entry level, you'd be looking at the very least mid-level property. It would still take a long time, and the amount of people that could afford it, around 1% of income earners can afford, from their own income, can afford to acquire the deposit and service the mortgage. Let's assume then that there's two people, maybe a married couple, something like that, who no children at this stage, who are looking at doing. Now, if they're both equally disciplined, which would be unlikely, but if they're both equally disciplined, then they could possibly bring that down to somewhere, say, between 10 and 11 years. This again assumes average wage, to buy an entry level property. But again, they'd be in their early 30s, and they've just got that entry level property, and they've still got a mortgage to service. It's unlikely that two people on average wage, considering both incomes, would opt for some shitbox at the entry level. They probably want a bit better. They'd probably be thinking more of tree-lined street type stuff. So you can just extend that out again. But without multi-generational living, where many people are sharing the costs and the burdens, or the grandparents look after children while the parents are at work, those sorts of things. We need to now real estate's at this price, at this relative affordability to wages. It's going to require a drastic and radical rethink of the social economics of living today. And one way of dealing with that, of course, is multi-generational living. But the proper approach, I believe, is to return the purchasing power to the paycheck. And this would affect, of course, what the price of real estate should be, and which is a huge profit maker for the financial and property developer sector, and in turn the amount of money they have to disgorge bribes and corrupt payments to politicians. So that's probably the least likely of solutions to come along. But I just wanted to illustrate that thing, that if you're on the average wage as a kid starting out with a college degree, there's no way you can afford even an entry-level shitbox house, or property, or one-bed apartment. You've been a Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.